The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council was a place where no one ever raised their voice. It was cold, bright, and filled with the banners of hundreds of empires. Golden walls stretched high into the shadows, and the light from 1,000 stars shone through the giant crystal dome. Delegates of alien races sat in curved rows around the center platform, their faces glowing with pride and arrogance. At the center stood a single human woman, tall, silent, dressed in a black uniform with a small silver emblem over her heart. Her hands were folded behind her back, her face calm, but her eyes sharp like blades. She had been chosen to speak for Earth, a world many of the Council thought was too young, too weak and too quiet for years. The Council had mocked humanity, pushing it to obey their rules. Tonight was supposed to be a ceremony of humiliation. The alien commander standing in front of her was from a proud empire that had never been challenged. His golden armor caught the light like fire. His smile was not friendly. It was the smile of someone who thought he owned the stars. "Human!" the commander said loudly, his deep voice echoing through the chamber. "You stand here because your kind needs permission to remain in our galaxy." She didn't speak. She only watched him, and that silence made some delegates shift in their seats. He stepped closer, his boots making a heavy sound on the polished floor. His long, scaled fingers tightened into a fist. And then, without warning, his hand moved fast. The sound was sharp, a single crack that echoed like thunder. His hand had slapped her across the face. The entire chamber burst into laughter. Hundreds of alien voices filled the air like roaring waves. Some slammed their hands on the tables. Others leaned back with cruel smiles. The commander spread his arms wide, proud of what he had done. "This," he shouted, "is what happens to weak species." But the woman didn't fall. She didn't touch her face. Her head tilted slightly from the impact, but her eyes never left his. The laughter started to slow down. No one had expected that. She straightened her posture, her boots clicking softly against the floor, and she took a single step toward him. The silver emblem on her chest caught the light, sending a cold reflection into the crowd. "You think this is the end?" she said softly. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried through the hall. The commander blinked, not expecting her to speak. He laughed again and leaned close. "It is not what I think," he hissed. "It is what the Council has already decided." Around them, alien leaders nodded, confident that this was just another display of power. They thought humanity would bow like others had before, but as she looked around the chamber, her lips curved into a slow, dangerous smile. A smile that made the laughter grow uneasy. Her hand moved behind her back. A small silver sphere sat hidden under her glove, her finger pressed lightly, and the crystal dome above flickered, one by one. The floating banners of alien empires began to shimmer and glitch. A giant holographic map of the galaxy suddenly filled the air. But this map was not the Council's. It was different. New borders flashed in white light. The symbol of Earth burned at the center like a star. The laughter stopped completely. Chairs creaked as alien leaders leaned forward. Confusion spreading like fire. The commander's smile fell. His golden armor no longer seemed so bright. "What have you done?" he whispered. She turned to him, her voice calm as still water. "I accepted the slap," she said. "Now you accept the consequences." A low rumble shook the chamber. At first they thought it was the building, but then the stars above the dome began to blink. Dozens of massive human warships appeared from the void. Their black hulls swallowed the starlight. Silent and still, they were close, too close. Security guards rushed in, but the woman raised a hand. "Don't," she said. "They are already inside your shields." Panic moved through the chamber like a wave. Alien leaders shouted orders, trying to activate their defenses. But their control panels were dead. The silver sphere had shut down every system. The once mighty council was silent again. But this silence was not pride anymore. It was fear. The commander stared at the ships above. His throat moved, but no words came out. His earlier arrogance vanished. He stepped back slowly, his hand shaking. "This is impossible," he whispered. The woman stepped closer to him, until they stood face to face. "No," she said quietly. This is justice. Every delegate could feel the weight of that word. For years, they had treated Earth as a child, a weak neighbor they could control. But now they saw a shadow behind that small planet, a shadow made of steel, fire, and silence. She walked toward the center of the platform. Her boots echoing in the chamber, every eye followed her. The holographic map of the galaxy still floated above, and the bright white lines of new borders pulsed slowly like a heartbeat. She raised her hand and pointed at the commander. "You slapped a human envoy in front of the galaxy," she said. "You thought this was power." He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came. She lowered her hand, her voice now firm and steady. "But power is not in the hand that slaps," she said. "It's in the hand that redraws the stars." The words struck the chamber like lightning. No one dared to speak, even the air felt heavy. She turned her back to the commander and began to walk away. Behind her, human warships rotated slowly in the sky, blocking every escape route. Their engines were silent. Their weapons locked but not fired. The commander fell to his knees, the same man who had laughed minutes earlier. His armor no longer shone. It looked small, weak, and powerless. As she reached the exit of the chamber, she paused and looked back once. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned with quiet fire. "This was your slap," she said. "This is our answer." The doors closed behind her with a deep sound, and the council chamber was left in silence once again. But this silence was different now. It was not the silence of control, it was the silence of fear. It was the silence before everything changed. The heavy doors of the Galactic Council chamber closed behind her, but the sound of that slap still hung in the air like smoke. Every alien leader in the room sat frozen, staring at the glowing map still floating above them. The silver lines of Earth's new borders were not just lines, they were a challenge. The commander who had slapped her was still on his knees, his hands shaking. His empire was strong, but even he could feel it. Something much larger was already moving outside their control. In the long hallway outside the chamber, the human envoy walked slowly. Her boots echoed softly against the marble floor. Behind her, two silent figures followed. Human officers dressed in dark uniforms with no flags, no rank marks. They moved like shadows, blending with the silence. She reached the balcony that opened to the night sky. Above the city, the human warships hung in silence, black and massive. Their outlines were sharp against the stars. Not firing, not threatening, just watching. Her voice broke the silence behind her. "They will call this an act of war." She didn't turn. She knew the voice well. It belonged to Captain Hale, the man who had commanded the fleet through 100 quiet missions. His tone was steady, but there was something sharp underneath. "They already declared war when they touched us," she said. Her voice calm like a blade of glass. Another officer stepped forward, a woman with short hair and cold eyes. "They think you brought a fleet to scare them," she said. "They don't know it's already too late." The envoy's lips curved into a faint smile. She could hear alarms echoing across the city as alien defense forces scrambled, trying to respond to something they didn't understand. "Let them think," she said. "Fear is a sharper weapon than fire." Inside the chamber, chaos was growing. One of the council elders slammed his fist on the table, his voice shaking with anger. "This is madness," he shouted. Earth was nothing, a colony world, a child. Another delegate, a creature with glowing blue eyes, hissed back. "A child does not bring a fleet to the council's doorstep." The commander struggled to stand, but his legs gave out. He looked up at the map still hanging above them. The bright human symbol burned in the center. "How?" he whispered. "How did they build this?" No one had an answer. For centuries, the council had monitored humanity. They thought humans were slow, too busy fighting among themselves, too fractured to unite. But what they didn't know was that silence was never weakness. It was preparation. A sudden flicker passed through the map. Every light in the chamber dimmed. A single new star blinked to life on the edge of the hologram. It wasn't a star. It was a ship, a massive human dreadnought entering orbit. Alien leaders gasped as their communication lines filled with a single message. Simple and clear: stand down, outside. The envoy raised her hand, and pressed a small device on her wrist. Across the planet, human ships slowly turned. Their engines glowed softly, not in threat but in control. They were surrounding the capital world, locking it down without a single shot fired. "Do you think they understand what this means?" Hale asked quietly. "They will," she answered. "Fear works faster than light." Back inside, panic spread like fire. Delegates argued, empires threatened, and the commander shouted for his fleets, but his commands went nowhere. Their networks were already under human control. Every channel, every system was dark. It was like the galaxy itself had gone silent. One of the older delegates, a wrinkled alien with silver skin, leaned forward and whispered, "They have been hiding their strength." Another slammed his hand against the table. "Impossible, their colonies are scattered. They don't have unity." "They didn't need unity," the silver-skinned elder said slowly. "They needed silence." The commander stumbled to his feet, his face pale, his voice cracked. "If they take this world, they take the council," a cold voice answered from the shadows. "No!" Everyone turned. The envoy had returned to the chamber. Flanked by the two silent officers, she walked with the calmness of someone who already owned the room. The delegates stared at her like prey cornered by a hunter. "You misunderstand," she said softly. "We don't want your counsel." The commander forced a laugh. "But it sounded weak." "Then what do you want?" he asked. She stopped at the center of the platform, the same place where she had been slapped. The silver emblem on her chest caught the flickering light again. "We want you to listen," she said. The room grew quieter. The laughter was gone. The arrogance was gone. Only fear remained. "We offered peace," she continued, her voice steady. "You gave us humiliation." She took a slow step forward, her boots tapping the floor like a clock counting down. "We asked for respect," she said. "You gave us a slap." She lifted her hand and snapped her fingers. Outside, one of the massive dreadnoughts opened its hull, revealing lines of glowing weapons. They didn't fire, but their silent presence was louder than any explosion. "Now we offer silence," she said, "and in silence, you will hear us." A trembling delegate rose from his seat. "You can't fight the galaxy," he shouted. "There are hundreds of us." She looked at him without blinking. "Then why are you shaking?" she asked quietly. His mouth opened, but no sound came. Hale's voice echoed through the chamber. "Calm and sharp. Your fleets are blind," he said. "Your systems are ours. Your defenses are gone. Your power was built on noise, and we learned how to move in silence." The envoy turned slowly to the commander. "You thought you broke us with a slap," she said. "But you only woke what you were too blind to see." The commander's knees hit the floor again. His voice broke. "What happens now?" he whispered. She walked closer, stopping just in front of him. "What happens now depends on how well you listen," she answered. All around the chamber, alien leaders lowered their heads. The same people who once mocked humanity were now silent, afraid to even breathe too loud. She tilted her head, her eyes cold but calm. "This is not the end," she said. "This is the beginning." And when she turned away, the map of the galaxy shifted once more. Borders moved, not with war, not with blood, but with fear and silence. And in that silence, the galaxy finally understood what had just happened. The Council wasn't laughing anymore. The universe now had a new center, and it spoke with a human voice. The sky above the Council world was no longer filled with stars. It was filled with shadows. The massive human fleet surrounded the planet like a silent storm. Their dark hulls swallowed the light, reflecting only the faint glow of their engines. Not a single shot had been fired, but every alien watching knew the truth. Humanity now controlled the battlefield without lifting a finger. In the council chamber, panic had quieted into something worse: silence. It wasn't the proud silence of power, it was the heavy, tight silence of fear. Alien leaders stared at the glowing holographic map, watching human borders pulse like a heartbeat through the galaxy. The commander who had started everything sat slumped in his chair, his golden armor no longer shining. His hands trembled as messages flashed across his private screen. His fleets had gone dark, every ship locked down, every communication line under human control. "She hasn't even made a demand," one delegate whispered, his voice shaky. She hasn't asked for anything. That's what makes it worse, another hissed. We can't fight what doesn't want anything. The doors opened without warning. The envoy walked in again, this time with no guards, no officers, only the sound of her boots against the floor. Her black uniform was spotless, her silver emblem gleaming. Every head in the chamber turned toward her, but no one dared to speak. She stopped in the center of the room, the same place where the slap had echoed hours earlier. Her eyes moved slowly across the chamber. Studying every face, she didn't look like a conqueror, but her silence carried more power than any weapon. "You thought we came for revenge," she said softly. Her voice echoed like calm thunder. "But revenge is too small for what happened here." The commander forced himself to stand. His voice cracked as he tried to sound strong. "You have surrounded a council world," he said. "You will bring war on yourself." She tilted her head slightly. "War," she repeated slowly. "You mean the thing you've already lost?" A quiet ripple passed through the chamber. Her words didn't need to be loud. They sank deep, pulling the air out of the room. The commander slammed his hand on the table, desperate to regain control. "We have allies," he shouted. "We have fleets that can't hear you," she interrupted calmly. "Allies who are too afraid to speak." His mouth opened and then closed again. She was right. His messages had gone unanswered. The allies he once commanded with a single order were now ghosts. She took another step forward. "When you slapped me, it wasn't just me you insulted," she said. "You told humanity it would never belong among the stars." Her voice hardened like steel. "You told us we were nothing." Several delegates lowered their eyes. Ashamed, others clenched their jaws, afraid. "We listened," she continued. "We watched. We prepared." A massive holographic display lit up behind her, showing years of silent expansion, human colonies buried beneath alien maps, hidden supply lines, shipyards built in shadow, fleets trained in silence for centuries. While the council laughed, humanity had built a network that no one saw. An alien delegate slammed his hand on the table. "You tricked us," he spat. "You built an empire in secret." She looked at him and smiled faintly. "No," she said, "you blinded yourself." The commander's voice shook. "If you wanted power, you could have taken it long ago," he said. "Why now?" She turned to him slowly, her face calm. "Because you showed us the moment you stopped seeing us as a threat," she said. "That was the moment we knew the council could be broken without a single shot." Outside, the human dreadnoughts shifted position. Their engines glowed brighter, casting long shadows through the council city. Crowds of aliens gathered in the streets below, watching the sky with fear in their eyes. The most powerful world in the galaxy was surrounded, and no one could stop it inside. The envoy raised her wrist. A soft light flickered. A single command pulsed through the human fleet. Every alien screen went black, replaced by one image, a star map slowly rewriting itself. The council's borders crumbled like sand, replaced by cold white lines and a new symbol, the emblem of Earth. A gasp filled the room. One of the oldest delegates, his voice trembling, whispered, "You're redrawing the galaxy." "Yes," she said, "because you've built it wrong." The commander's fists clenched, his voice breaking. "This isn't diplomacy," he shouted. "This is domination." She walked closer, her boots echoing softly. "Diplomacy died the moment your hand touched my face," she said coldly. "Now you will learn what silence can do." For the first time in his life, the commander took a step back, his world, his power. Everything he believed unshakable was crumbling like glass beneath her calm voice. One of the delegates raised a shaking hand. "What happens to us?" she asked. "What happens to the council?" The envoy stopped at the center again and looked up at the holographic map. Her voice softened but didn't lose its weight. "That depends on whether you choose fear or respect," she said. "The galaxy is about to change, and you can either kneel or stand beside us." The delegates looked at each other, their fear twisting into something else. They saw what she had built, not with war, but with patience. They saw a power that didn't need to scream, didn't need to fight, because it had already won long before this night. The commander lowered his head slowly. His voice was barely a whisper. "And if we refuse," he said. She leaned closer, her eyes hard as steel. "Then history will remember that you had a choice," she answered. The doors of the chamber opened again, and for a brief moment, a warm light spilled inside from the hallway. It touched her shoulders like the calm before a storm. Outside, the first rays of a false dawn spread over the council world. But the light came not from the sun. It came from the engines of the human fleet. In every corner of the galaxy, leaders watched their screens as Earth redrew the map. One silent line at a time, she turned away from the chamber, her voice carrying one last message behind her. "Power doesn't shout," she said, "it whispers." And as the door closed, the most powerful council in the galaxy sat in silence. They had ruled the stars for centuries, but now, for the first time, they realized they were not rulers anymore. They were witnesses to the rise of something they had never understood. Humanity, quiet, patient, and unstoppable. The night above the council world felt endless. The stars were hidden behind the giant hulls of human warships. Their black surfaces reflected nothing, moving like silent guardians around the planet. The entire galaxy watched the live feeds in silence. Empires that once called themselves mighty now, whispering in fear. Humanity had not fired a single shot, but its grip on the council world was complete. It was no longer a question of power. It was a question of who would kneel first. Inside the council chamber, the air was tense and heavy. The glowing holographic map filled the room, showing human lines cutting through star systems like a blade. The alien leaders who once barked orders now whispered to each other, their voices trembling. They could see their borders shrinking, their fleets disappearing from their screens. One empire after another was going dark. The envoy stood in the center of the room, calm as ever. Her black uniform looked almost sharp against the golden light of the chamber. She didn't speak yet, but she didn't have to. The silence she carried was louder than any threat. The commander who had started everything leaned against the table. His hands were shaking. His empire had sent messages, but none had returned. He had built his entire life on the idea that no one could touch him. But now, as he looked at her, he realized he had touched the wrong person. Finally, a voice broke the silence. It was an alien from the Thara Empire, his long fingers tapping nervously against the metal. "What do you want from us?" he asked. She turned slowly toward him. "I want nothing," she answered. "That's what terrifies you the most." The alien lowered his eyes. He understood this wasn't about war or territory. It was about control, and control didn't need to scream. Suddenly, the chamber lights flickered. A new hologram appeared above the table, a live transmission from one of the oldest empires in the council, their ruler. A tall figure wrapped in silver robes appeared. His voice was calm but trembling beneath the surface. "We will not fight," he said. We submit." A wave of whispers filled the chamber. The first empire had knelt. The symbol of the Thara Empire shifted on the map. Its borders glowed white, then merged into the expanding human network. The envoy didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She simply nodded once. And the map adjusted itself like it had been waiting. One of the delegates slammed his hands on the table. "You're breaking the council apart," he shouted. She looked at him with a calm face. "No," she said. "You broke it yourselves the moment you believed no one could stand against you." The commander pushed himself away from the table, his voice rising. "They kneel because they are weak," he shouted. "But we will not." She took a slow step toward him. Her boots echoed softly in the room. "You already have," she said quietly. His jaw tightened. "No," he growled. "I will not bow to you." She tilted her head slightly. "Then your empire will fall before anyone else's," she said. At that moment, one of his personal guards ran into the chamber, breathless and pale. "Commander!" the guard shouted. "Our fleets! They are surrounded. They can't move. They can't fire." The commander's face went white. He grabbed the edge of the table. "No," he whispered. "That's not possible." The envoy raised her wrist. A soft blue light filled the room. A live feed showed the commander's entire defense fleet trapped between human warships. Every movement they made was countered, every signal blocked. "You built your empire on fear," she said slowly. But fear obeys the stronger shadow. He stared at the screen, his throat tightening. "What do you want from me?" he asked again, this time not with anger, but with a breaking voice. She stepped closer until she was standing right in front of him, her eyes locked onto his, cold and steady. "I want you to understand what happens when arrogance meets silence," she said. He didn't move. His empire, once feared, was now as fragile as glass. The entire chamber was watching him, waiting. If he resisted, his fall would be the example. If he surrendered, his pride would shatter. A delegate from a smaller empire whispered, "Kneel!" His voice shook. "Kneel before you lose everything." The commander's jaw clenched. His mind was screaming to fight, to resist, but his hands betrayed him. They trembled. He looked at the map again. The human lines kept spreading each second he hesitated. His empire was slipping away. Finally, with a deep and broken breath, he sank to his knees. His golden armor hit the floor with a sharp, ringing sound. For the first time in his life, he knelt not to a god, not to an emperor, but to a woman who had walked into the council with nothing but silence. The chamber stayed quiet. No one laughed, no one cheered. The weight of that moment was heavier than war. The envoy didn't move. She simply looked down at him. Her voice was soft, almost gentle. "This was never about vengeance," she said. "This was about rewriting the story you thought you owned." The map above them shifted again. The commander's empire turned white, absorbed into the growing network of Earth's influence. The room shook slightly as the signal spread across the galaxy. One by one, other empires began to send messages, not of war, but of surrender. They knew resistance was pointless. Humanity didn't conquer. They erased the need for a fight. One of the oldest council members, his voice heavy with years, finally spoke. "The galaxy will never be the same," he said. She turned toward him, her face unreadable. "No," she said. "It will be better, outside." The human fleet moved slowly, reshaping the sky. Civilizations across the stars watched as the balance of power they had always believed was eternal fell in a single night. Not to bombs, not to blood, but to a quiet strength that had waited for the perfect moment. The envoy walked toward the great doors as they opened wide. A soft light spilled in from the city outside. The first kneeling empire had already raised human banners. Ships began broadcasting new star coordinates. The galaxy was no longer theirs. It belonged to the silence that had been ignored. Behind her, the commander remained on his knees, his empire gone, his pride broken. The delegates who once mocked humanity now whispered among themselves, their voices small and afraid. As she stepped out into the night, the stars returned, but they no longer belonged to the council. They belonged to those who had been underestimated. The war had ended before it began, and the new map of the galaxy was being written by the hands they had tried to slap away. She paused at the top of the stairs and looked up at the sky. Her voice was quiet but strong. "This is the sound of power," she whispered, "and it does not need to shout." And as the fleet repositioned and the kneeling spread across the stars, the galaxy finally understood. The age of the council had ended. The age of humanity had begun. The night sky above the council world glowed with an unnatural stillness. Human warships drifted in formation like giant shadows across the stars. Their black hulls reflected the faint light of distant suns, surrounding the planet with silent precision. No alarms rang anymore. No one was shouting. The chaos had faded into a kind of forced calm, a calm built not on peace but on fear. The galaxy was holding its breath, waiting for what came next. In the council chamber, the map still floated above the table. Its colors had changed. White lines marked Earth's expanding influence. Each shift on that map was like a quiet explosion. Borders erased without a single shot fired. One by one, more empires had bent their knees, submitting to a power they had mocked for centuries. Those who had resisted had already seen their fleets locked down, their worlds surrounded. They had learned that silence could crush as hard as war. The envoy entered the chamber again. Her presence was enough to make everyone go quiet. She wore the same black uniform, the silver emblem shining faintly on her chest. No crown, no army behind her, just the kind of stillness that made entire empires tremble. She stopped at the center of the room, the same place where she had been slapped days earlier, and slowly looked around the chamber. One of the delegates, an elder with trembling hands, spoke first. "The galaxy is yours," he whispered. "What will you do with it?" She didn't answer right away. She let the silence stretch. "Long enough for their fear to grow heavy finally," she said softly. "It was never yours to give." A murmur passed through the chamber. The alien leaders glanced at each other nervously. They had ruled for centuries. They had dictated laws, borders, trade, and wars. But now the one they once called weak stood above them. The commander, still kneeling on the floor near the table, raised his head slowly. His voice was rough and tired. "You think this will last forever," he said. "The galaxy will unite against you. Someday," she turned her eyes toward him. Her voice stayed calm. "They already were united against us," she said. "And you still lost." His lips pressed into a thin line. He had no answer. Outside, the stars shifted as the human fleet realigned its positions. The soundless movement of thousands of ships cast a shadow over the entire capital world. Aliens in the streets watched in awe and fear as the banners of the council were lowered, replaced by glowing white symbols of Earth. The night felt like history itself was being rewritten. Back inside, one of the younger delegates slammed his hand on the table. "This is not order," he shouted. "This is fear." She turned to him slowly. "Fear is the only language you understood when you slapped us," she said. "Now you will listen to silence." He tried to stand taller. "To sound brave, empires built on fear will fall," he hissed. Her voice didn't rise. "Then you should know," she said. "Because yours already did." A ripple of unease passed through the chamber. The commander lowered his head again, the golden edges of his armor dull under the dim light. The envoy lifted her wrist and pressed a small silver control embedded in her glove. A soft hum filled the air as the holographic map changed once again. A glowing line spread through the center of the galaxy, cutting through old borders like a blade. New lines formed slowly, one after another. Their shape created something no one had ever seen before, a single unified star network. Humanity's mark, the chamber erupted in whispers. Some alien leaders gasped, some looked away, but none dared to speak against it. This wasn't just an occupation. This was the rewriting of the galaxy itself. An elder rose slowly from his seat, his voice weak but trembling with emotion. "You're drawing a line," he said. "A single line across every star." "Yes," she answered. "A line you can't cross again." The commander laughed bitterly, the sound harsh. "You think a line will keep you safe," he said. "You think they'll follow your rules forever?" She walked toward him, her boots echoing on the cold floor. "No," she said softly. "I don't need them to follow." He frowned. "Then what is this?" he whispered. "This is not a wall," she said. "It's a mirror." The words fell like a stone into water, spreading through the room. She was not just carving power. She was forcing every empire to see themselves in the reflection of what they had created. For centuries they ruled through arrogance and silence. Now they were being ruled by someone who had mastered both. Outside, the first fleets of the kneeling empires began to move, not in rebellion, but in formation. They had joined the human fleet, not because they were forced, but because they feared being left behind. Power was no longer shared. It was concentrated in a single voice that didn't need to scream. The envoy stopped at the center of the room again. Her shadow stretched across the floor, touching the places where proud rulers once stood. "This galaxy will not run on your council anymore," she said. "It will run on consequences." A young alien delegate stood, his hands shaking. "What if someone crosses your line?" he asked quietly. She tilted her head slightly. "Then they'll discover what you discovered," she answered. "Silence can be louder than war." One of the older leaders pressed both hands against the table. "So this is the new law," he said. "Your law." She looked at him with calm eyes. "No," she said, "this is balance. You had your age of noise. Now comes the age of silence." The commander's breathing was uneven. He had built an empire on fear, but it had collapsed without a single battle. He raised his eyes to her and whispered, What are you? She leaned closer, her eyes hard as steel. The answer to your arrogance, she said. Outside, the stars brightened as the human fleet activated a network of satellites. New communication lines spread across the galaxy. The first pieces of the new order were falling into place. Civilizations far away began to receive one single message. Not a threat, not a warning, but a fact. The council was gone, the map was redrawn, and humanity now stood in the center. She turned away from the chamber and walked toward the doors. Her boots echoed through the vast hall. Each step was like a hammer on old power. Behind her, the delegates sat in silence. They weren't rulers anymore. They were witnesses to the rise of a power they never took seriously. As she reached the great doors, the commander whispered one last time, his voice empty. "You can't rule forever." She didn't look back. "I don't need forever," she said. "I just need the moment when everything changes." And as the doors closed behind her, the chamber remained silent. The new line across the stars burned brightly on the map, a promise and a warning. The galaxy had crossed the point of no return, and from this night onward, the story of power would no longer be written in alien tongues. It would be written in human silence. The stars hung over the council world like quiet witnesses. The human fleet remained in orbit, black and still, a wall of silent power stretching across the void below. Cities glowed faintly under the weight of the new order. For the first time in centuries, no alien banner flew above the council tower. Only a single glowing emblem shone across the skyline, the symbol of Earth. Inside the chamber, the old council table lay in silence. It had once been a place where arrogant voices filled the air, where alien rulers gave orders like gods. Now it was only a room of quiet whispers and fearful eyes. The map above the table had changed again. The line drawn by the human envoy glowed brighter, splitting the galaxy into something new. Her line was not just a border, it was a promise. And everyone in that room knew it could not be crossed without consequence. The commander sat on the cold floor, his golden armor dull, his empire once feared, now belonged to the silence he had mocked every time he closed his eyes. He heard the sound of that slap, the sound he had given, the sound that had set all of this in motion. He had not imagined that a single moment of arrogance would break the spine of an entire galaxy. The doors opened, and she entered the chamber for the last time. The envoy walked with the same calm, steady pace. No guards, no escort, only the sound of her boots. The alien leaders fell silent the moment they saw her. They had once thought she was beneath them, but now they feared even the quiet of her steps. She reached the center of the room and looked at the faces surrounding her. Some stared in silence, some lowered their heads. A few still tried to hold on to the fragments of their pride. One of the older delegates stood, his voice shaking. "You have everything now," he said. "The galaxy bends to your silence." "What happens next?" She didn't answer right away. She walked to the table and rested her hand on its cold surface. Her eyes lifted to the glowing map. The light of the new border flickered softly. "What happens next?" she said finally. "Is choice." The commander clenched his fists. "Choice!" He spat bitterly. "You've taken every choice from us." She turned to him, her expression calm. "No," she said. "You did that when you believed no one else could rise." He tried to stand, but his legs were weak. "One day," he said through clenched teeth, "someone will rise against you, just like you rose against us." Her eyes narrowed slightly, but her voice didn't harden. "Then let them," she said, "because when they rise, they'll rise against silence, not arrogance." A young alien delegate whispered nervously. "You've changed everything." "Yes," she said softly. "Because everything was broken. Outside, the stars shifted as human warships began to pull back slowly. Their engines glowed faintly. They were not retreating. They were leaving a message behind. They didn't need to stay forever to be remembered. Fear had already planted roots deeper than their weapons ever could. One of the delegates spoke with a tired voice. "If you don't want to rule forever, why redraw the galaxy?" She looked up at the map, the faint light reflecting in her eyes. "Because someone had to," she answered. "You ruled through noise, through fear, through arrogance. We will rule through silence." The commander's voice cracked. Silence doesn't last. She walked toward him. Her steps echoed slowly. Neither did your power, she replied. The chamber doors opened wider, and the distant hum of the human fleet vibrated through the walls. It wasn't the sound of war, it was the sound of a warning. The galaxy understood now that silence could be far louder than 1,000 guns. She turned back to the council, her eyes scanning every face. We are not here to burn your worlds, she said. We are here to remind you what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. The alien rulers sat frozen. Her words cut deeper than weapons could. They had once mocked humans, thinking their patience meant fear. Now they understood. Patience had been the blade waiting in the dark. A tall delegate rose slowly from his seat, his voice trembling but curious. What becomes of the council? He asked. She met his eyes. The council ends here, she said. But what you build next depends on how much you've learned. The commander let out a bitter laugh. You destroy the council and call it mercy. She leaned forward, her voice quiet. I give you something you never gave us, freedom. For a moment, no one spoke. Then one by one, the alien delegates lowered their heads. Not out of fear this time, but because they finally understood. The world they had built was gone, not burned by war, but swallowed by silence. Outside, the warships slowly turned, their formations shifted, and corridors of stars opened between them. The blockade wasn't needed anymore. The galaxy itself had become the proof. Earth had won its place without asking permission. The envoy walked to the great balcony at the end of the chamber. The night wind hit her face softly. The stars stretched out like endless roads. For centuries, those stars belonged to the council. Now they were free, hail. The captain of the fleet stepped beside her. It's done, he said quietly. She nodded slowly. No, she whispered. It's beginning. He looked at her. They'll fear us for generations. They'll respect us, she corrected, because we didn't take their world. We changed it. Behind her, the alien leaders remained seated in silence. Their empires would rebuild, but never as before. The fear of silence would follow them everywhere. They would think twice before raising their hands again. The commander leaned back against the wall, exhausted. You've turned us into your shadow, he whispered. She didn't look at him. No, she said. I've shown you ours. The stars shone brighter as the first human ship began to ascend from orbit. Others followed one after another, until the black wall in the sky started to fade. They didn't need to stay. Their presence was carved into history already. As she stood on the balcony, she let the quiet fill the air. No anthem, no marching soldiers, just silence. The same silence they had mocked, the same silence that had conquered them all. Her voice was soft when she finally spoke. The galaxy will remember this night, she said. Not as a war, but as a lesson. Hale looked at the stars, his jaw tight. And what if they forget, he asked. She gave a faint smile. Then they'll hear the silence again. The human fleet disappeared into the darkness, leaving only starlight and a quiet that felt endless. In the chamber behind her, the council leaders remained where they were, unable to return to the past. The slap that once echoed through these halls had built an empire, not of noise, not of shouting, but of silence. And from that silence a new galaxy was born, one where Earth didn't ask to belong. It simply became the center, and the stars themselves bowed without a fight.